Let's bring our meeting to order. Tonight, our invocation will be provided by Councilman David Moore.
Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this beautiful day that you have provided for us, Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to be here with each other and to serve, Lord. We ask your guidance and your direction tonight in everything that we do, Lord. We'll give you the praise and the honor. We ask all these things in your precious and heavenly name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Next is set the agenda. Are there any questions or changes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Ms. Polish, second by Mr. Craig. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes. Next is our consent agenda. We have 3 items. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Ms. Harris, second by Mr. Meadows. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. I will mention Councilwoman Lauren Shoemaker is on the phone. She's called out of town on business, but is calling in. We had a policy back when COVID was in that you could call in and vote. Now that is no longer in place, so she can call in, or a council person can call in, ask questions, speak, but they cannot vote. Okay? So that was stipulated with us by our city attorney prior to the meeting. I was unaware of that. So glad she made us aware of that. So we've passed the consent agenda. We now are with our full agenda, which is one item, which is pretty big. The 2023-24 fiscal or financial discussion and staff direction. Michelle? Okay. Michelle Woods.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. All right, our typical budgeting process is all department line items requests are submitted by the end of March. Normally the month of April, Finance, the city manager, assistant city manager reviews the requests and makes needed adjustments. Finance meets with the departments to discuss any changes the month of April. We give you a proposed budget at the first council meeting in May. We do a budget discussion and presentation at the May work session, and we adopt the budget at the first June meeting. This year, we've done the process a little bit different. We asked the departments to do submittals based on 3 categories: do an essentials category, a non-essential, operations, and capital. Then Finance met with city manager and assistant city manager and reviewed and compiled information for the city council for the April work session. The goal of this work session is to establish an anticipated tax rate so we can continue to build the budget. That's the main goal tonight. Then we will give you a proposed budget at the May 8th meeting, do a presentation at May 22nd, and hopefully do the public hearing and budget adoption at the June 12th meeting. The preliminary budget numbers: current amended budget for general fund is a little over $19 million. Estimated year ends a little over $19 million. Projected for 23-24 is $20,276,988. That's at a 40.5 cents tax rate and a 95% collection rate.
Michelle, would you just remind everybody what our current tax rate is?
48.5 cents is our
Thank
current
you.
tax rate. Enterprise, the current budget is $13,721,720. Estimated year ends a little over, right at $14 million. Projected 23-24 is $21,081,367. The original general fund budget was $17,153,827. So we've got a little over $2 million of budget amendments so far this fiscal year. Enterprise still has the original budget of $13 million. Here are the revenue projections for the general fund. I can go into detail if you wish. Basically, we kind of held flat. Even with some of the projected increases with state, we stayed under those. And some of the decreases that the state projected, we done even more with that, just to kind of keep a more flat budget, as much budget as we can. It still comes in with the new tax rate, comes in almost 5% higher than current revenue. Same with the enterprise fund. We kind of held it around 2%, didn't go any more over that, just kind of based on trend. This is the last of the 5-year water and sewer state rate study, and there's no increase. But we will be doing a study this coming budget year for the next fiscal year. The preliminary proposed expenditures, general fund essentials is $15,643,843. Non-essential is $1,229,784. Capital at $3,403,361 with a total of $20,276,988. Enterprise essential is $8,408,203. Non-essential is $1,417,122. Capital at $11,256,042 with a grand total of $21,081,367. The essential only for general fund would be about a 24.622 cents on the tax rate. Non-essential 4.783. Capital 11.095, and then 40 and a half cents would fund all essential, non-essential, and capital in the general fund. Essential, non-essential, and capital in the enterprise fund is basically funded by the fees and then unrestricted net position, which is basically a fund balance on the enterprise fund side. Here's a list of the general fund, just this year, capital, which comes out to $3,403,361. We did put a little CPI inflation number in there because what we found with this year's capital, when we had the original numbers and then going out and trying to get vehicles, everything was coming in higher. So we put that little inflation rate in there to try and help offset that for the coming year. Enterprise there's the breakout of it, and it comes to $11 million. It has some big ticket items, which is the Lower Dutchman's Creek parallel sewer line, and then the Riverbank water tank is in there. For the non-essential, and what we ask departments, when we say non-essential, it's non-essential for their department to actually run, but it's not the quality of city that we would need to run. So that's why we had them break it out, and we just want to emphasize it would cut, you'll see later in the presentation, it would cut some of the things that we've built over the years to get our city to where we want it to be. On the enterprise fund, the same thing, and it equals to, let me go back, sorry. It equals to the $1,229,784 in the general fund, and then $1,417,122 in the enterprise fund. Non-essential items, these were the top ones out of both funds. Food and provision for meetings, community relations, any travel and training that's not tied to a certification that you have to have, salary study, employee increases, new employees, consulting, educational programs, athletic programs, uniforms for recreation, field and parks maintenance outside of normal routine, any special events like Mount Holly Night, Spring Fest, etc., and the Christmas parade. The reappraisal, and when we had our retreat, it was lower. We actually got new numbers after that. That's why the property valuation actually went up versus when we presented at the retreat. That's why the value of a penny, you'll see later, has went down versus what we presented at the retreat. Real property is $2.8 billion, personal property $146 million, public service $122, motor vehicles $259. We done a 10% appeal deduction because they're still going through an appeal process, and we have not heard back on those. And that was kind of the rate that all municipalities in the county were following. So the total assessed valuation was $3,058,470,435, which currently has the value of a penny of $305,847. This walks through the LGC spreadsheet. This kind of just tells you how to do it, the instructions, where to get the numbers from in your previous audits. And that's all this is, just kind of telling you what it's used for and the instructions on how to get the information to plug in the spreadsheet. And this is the actual spreadsheet. We plugged in the numbers. And what it is, the reason behind this is to look at last year's valuation before reval, what we would get what we would get revenue off of that 48.5 cents based on that valuation, and then put the new valuation in. What rate would you need to get that same amount of revenue with the percentage increase for the prior 3 years prior to valuation? And we did confirm, we had LGC, the School of Government, and First Tryon review our spreadsheet and make sure we weren't missing anything and everybody was in agreement. We reached out to surrounding cities and got their proposed tax rates. All these are just proposed. Nobody's actually set their rate, to my knowledge, from when I last checked last Friday. And as you see, the average among all of them, taking out the county because it was a big decrease, the average is about 4.28% decrease. In the city, what we're proposing is above that, is at 16.49% decrease from our current 48.5 cents. Our fund balance, we appropriated, like I said, a little over $2 million this budget year. Based on projection of revenues by the end of the year, it don't look like we're going to need that to pull that out to balance, just because state revenues are coming in way ahead. Our investment earnings, we've moved money around to get better leverage on interest rates, so we may not need that to actually, based on projections, we won't need that. We looked, without using that, we kind of project that we'll put another $400,000 in fund balance at year end. So projected fund balance at June 30th is $23,809,903. The designated restricted portion of it is $9,127,710, and I left at your stations that breakout if you want to know what that number entails. That's on that spreadsheet. So projected unassigned would be $14,682,193. Our internal policy is of 25%, would have to set aside a little, right at $5 million, $4,804,348. So available for appropriation would be $9,877,845. And kind of, we wanted to let you know we've got a hefty fund balance, and reason we do have that is staff has been fiscally responsible in expenditure over the years. Capital has been kept to a minimum, and just the economic conditions of revenue from the state have been really, really well the past few years. Just to recap the cents on the tax rate, 24.622 would fund the essential only, 4.783 the non-essential, 11.095 the capital, with a total of 40.5 to fund it all. Things we wanted you to consider is future annexations. If we drop too low, it may fail our cost-benefit analysis. This does not, you've got to think about private development and redevelopment. They must have the final certificate of occupancy completed by December. They would have had to have it by December 2022 to expect any revenue in budget year 23-24. The next reval is 4 more years. The uncertainty of state revenues, tax rate's the only thing the city can control. And it's other city projects that are not included in the capital improvement plan that may come up. Just like so far this year, we've budgeted almost, a little over $2 million worth of stuff that we didn't have in the budget. So that's things to consider, and then inflation itself. And I'm going to ask Brian to come up. He's going to run some numbers on.
Thank you, Michelle. So in your packet, there was, at the end of the packet, there was a spreadsheet about tax rates and property tax. And what staff has done is we laid 2 scenarios at your table ahead of the meeting. So we, in the packet, it talks about the residential, commercial, industrial average kind of across the city. But we wanted to dive deeper. So we have a sheet 2, which I have on the screen here, that really looks at it's diving deeper into the residential of a mean tax value of right now across the city is approximately 347,000. But what we wanted to do is say, well, that's now. Let's look back at last year before the reappraisals, because 68% was our average increase with this reval, but we've also heard others up to 87% increase. So we want to say, okay, if most of the homes in Mount Holly are about 347,000, where were they last year if we were to back out 68% and 87%? So you can see that those prices a year ago would have been, or home values were 206,000 and 185,000. So we followed the same scenario of looking at what the current value is at the top. The top 3 kind of follow of what it would be under the proposed county, proposed city at the new value, but we wanted to dive into what the last year's taxes were for those properties at those values previously. So you can see it shows that what those taxes were being paid last year. And then at the bottom, we really want to say, okay, what does that mean? What's the difference in the property value that people are actually having to pay? So for a home that was decreased back to the 68% last year, they're really only paying $404 more this year based on a 48.5-cent proposed tax rate, which breaks down to $34 a month. And then we did the same with the 87% to show that it's only $506 more a year, $42 a month. So we're just trying to put it in what were they paying last year to the city, what could they be paying this year with a 48.5-cent tax rate. So that's one scenario that we want to present. Sheet 3.
Can,
Yes, sir.
it's a lot of science, so if you don't mind for a minute.
No problem.
So if we go back and we take the mean tax value of 347,200, so what we're showing is if nothing changes, if the county changes, we don't, and then if both of us change, okay, going down the roads, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're kind of I think, where we need to be. I'm asking this question. I'm not making a statement. Kind of the bottom one here, the 61 cents that we have heard the county propose, the 40.5 that we're looking at. The property tax is 35.24 on the new assessed 68% increased value, right? Is that's the third?
Yeah, that's the
row
third
down.
one. Yes, sir.
So then we would go and look at what that person was paying last year based on that value before the increase.
That is correct.
So for one of these, it's $900 a year. For the other one, it's $1,100 a year more, with the revaluation and the taxes dropping, right?
Correct.
So if we did nothing, taxes would double, almost. It would go up $2,000 a month.
Yes, sir.
And that's based on the 347 value at its current rates that we have today, right?
Yes, sir.
So I'm reading that correctly.
That's correct.
Okay. Does that help? I know that's pretty fast. That's a lot of math, but I think at the end of the day, the bottom two scenarios are what lead to the tax difference from 2022 to 2023. You're basing that on the proposed new tax rates, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the difference would be $404 a year or $34 a month more, and at the higher rate of 87% increase, it's $506 a year or $42 a month at the proposed tax rates
Yes,
for the
sir.
county and the city. Okay. Jeff, I'm sorry, Councilman Meadows.
That's fine. So to add a little bit of context to these numbers, we have how many housing units total?
Roughly, approximately 5,800.
About 5,800 units. And one of the concerns that we talked about at the retreat was, what's going to happen to folks? We have kind of a housing pyramid, and there's kind of that entry-level bracket, kind of 188 now, 120,000. It's right in that range. What's happening to those folks? People carry a mortgage. What's going to happen to their escrow? Concerned about our kind of everyday citizens that are facing other challenges financially. So one of the things that was interesting in this is that as we started slicing and dicing the numbers, we learned that we've got about 1,900 units that are at a valuation of $500,000 or more, which was surprising. That's a higher number than it used to be. Means our property values are rising. Property taxes are rising too, but didn't mean to say that there. The other thing that was interesting was looking at the average. I think it was about 800 to 900 units. There's that 347 number, and then when you get down to that next rung, there's about 500 units, and you hadn't gone over it yet when we get into the 200,000 value. So one of the things I kind of wanted to point out is that we had an increase of 68% on the whole. And what we're trying to do is dig down a little deeper into what happens to individuals, with the action that we're taking, because the average, some are above, some are below, and we have some folks that are more vulnerable than others, right? So that was what we were trying to focus on, what is actually going to happen to them with whatever action we decide to take today. So that was kind of the overarching idea behind why, staff was asked to take a look at some of these numbers. I think Mayor Huff went through the methodology well. I just wanted to give it context on why those questions were asked and why staff was drilling down into the numbers, because a lot of folks were saying exactly what you did, which was they were doing the millage rate and going, oh my, I'm going to have a doubling in this, it shows, of my tax rate if nothing happens. So the county has come forward and said we're going to drop our rate, and then we're looking at the same. If I can, I'd like staff to kind of walk through how did we get to the point where we get to do our part, because I think that's important. What did the state do, what did the county do, and where do we fit? Is that something that staff can kind of talk about at a higher level? So I think it's important for folks to understand what role we play and how little control we have of this process.
You're talking about in the revaluation process itself.
How did we get here? How far apart are evaluations? When is the next one? Why did this one happen at this point in time? You guys have talked some about that, but I'd like to have that context for the rest of our discussion.
Basically, the county, have to follow the county, and they're on a 4-year evaluation. So the last one was in 19 taking place for fiscal year 20. So, and as far as the city, we just get the numbers from the county. We can't control that 2 billion, 8, that's what they give us. So we just have to plug in the numbers with that spreadsheet to try and figure out how, with this new valuation, how are we going to get the same amount of revenue when we were at 48.5 cents. Does that answer your question?
It's part of it. So you're saying that the revaluation, the value assigned to our homes, the county does, we just receive that information. We have no say in it.
Correct.
We don't have any input. We don't get to say, we think this is going on. We see this trend. We have no appraisers involved.
No,
we
sir.
basically are, here's your number.
Yes.
So the other question I want folks to fully understand as well is what made the county go and do this valuation at this point in time? What caused that to happen? Because some folks say, well, they could have waited 8 years. Why'd they go 4? And I think there's some state law in play, but I'd rather have staff or maybe, I don't know, Marie, if that's your, I don't know who the proper person is to answer that, but I'd like folks to understand what drove this process, what kicked it off.
Do you want to do that, or you want me to do it generically? Oh, you can if you want. It's triggered by the growth number, right? So there's a growth, I know you're wanting them to say it, but I don't think they're prepared. But it's triggered by a growth number that says, hey, you have to do this because there's a certain amount of growth taking place in your area. For instance, Cleveland County didn't do it this year, but Gaston County did, because the state said by statute, this is when you have to do it. So what the county did 4 years ago was said, you know what, we're just going to do it every 4 years on the same 4-year cycle. We're not going to get off of it, and this is the way we're going to do it.
So playing off of the growth comment, so from a staff perspective, just so people understand, when we have more people, what does that mean for our staff? What does that do?
Means there's more services we have to provide. If there's more people, there's more things that have to take place. So there's staff implications at that point.
So I'm going to be a little bit facetious. So we build a better spreadsheet and we get to run more numbers through a spreadsheet, or do we need more people to do our work?
If there's more people in the city, there's more things that we have to do to provide services, and therefore it's an in turn effect of need to have more staff to do that, or either look at potentially outsourcing some of that, and that's a cost as well.
So I guess my overall point of that is that we're faced with a decision to make about what services we provide to our citizens and at what level. And that translates directly into dollars and cents. We talk about a lot of dollars, but I'm trying to put it in a context that if you were to kind of watch this and go, hey, why are they doing this? If you want your trash picked up once a week, you want the water to run regularly without it breaking down, you want the toilets to flush, you want to have a Parks and Rec department. I mean, that's one of the questions I have when we get there, but I'm just trying to provide an overall context. County didn't really have a whole lot of choice in this matter. They were driven because growth triggers more services, and you have state laws that say you have to do X, Y, and Z. We have police and fire standards we have to meet, and we have a quality of life we're concerned about here that comes from our strategic vision plan. So it's not just the group up here saying it, we've gone through 3 iterations over 20 years with 8,000 plus citizens weighing in saying these are the things that are important to us. So trying to balance what the citizens have said they want for services, what they want as a quality of life, against what happens to households on a daily basis and how they pay their bills. It's tough to balance all that, so I just kind of wanted to put that in context. I've got some other questions. I don't know if they're appropriate now or not, but.
Well, are you going to go through the other spreadsheet?
I think that was.
I think that's more, I don't want to say meaningful, but I think it's more applicable if you go through the other one. I've just reviewed it, but I've only had a few minutes, but I think it's something that you can people can identify with it better, I think.
Yes, sir. So sheet 3 at your desks does the same thing as sheet 2, but we are really looking at the lowest tax value range within the city. So we're looking at the $0 to $200,000 homes that are now at that value based on the new appraisal. So we did the same thing. We said, well, what were those tax values of those homes a year ago? And so we did the same methodology and showed that someone that had a 68% increase, well, a year ago their property is worth $119,000. And then if it was an 87% increase, it was worth $106,000. So we're really starting to look at people that may really be on the fringe, and this could make or break them. So we want to be thoughtful about that. So staff put together that information to look at, again, what that would look like now under the existing tax rates at the county and at the city. And then we said, again, what would it be based on the proposed county rate and the current city rate? And then we said about what would it look like at $200,000 for the proposed county and city. And then again, we compared that to their previous tax rates at those 119,000, 106,000 property values. And what it came down to is that the difference under the proposed tax rates versus the existing at the new values would be an extra $233 a year for people that had a 68% increase, so $19 a month, and $291 increase for the year at an 87%, which is $24 a month.
Can I ask, it may sound like a silly question, but how many tax rates do we get to set? How many tax rates do we get to set?
One.
So it doesn't matter, like we did with the water rate, we've designed a rung where if I use under X, I can count on the bill being X. We don't have any of those tools available to us in this process. It is a rate. Is there a differential between commercial and residential property with the rate that we set?
No, sir.
So we get to set one rate for everything. So whether it's a residential at our first rung of value or it's our highest valued commercial property, it's the same rate, right? And are there any carve-outs? Is there anything we can really do at the local level to change what we're charging? No. So I just want to make sure we have context. But
Okay. Are there any questions thus far on what's been presented? One thing that we had requested was to know what was in, if you'll go to your fund balance page, what is actually in the designated restricted, what has already been accounted for out of that fund balance that's available. That's fine. So you guys, the staff put together this list. It shows you these. I've got a question on one of them, but the South Gateway project is the road. Okay, so that's $3 million for the road. What is Caramont 336,594? What is that?
It's funds that we received from Caramont. It was a lot more than that years ago that was set aside for greenways, and that's a small amount that's left.
I got
in
you.
those funds.
And then the Veterans Park acquisition still in the restricted or designated amounts. Can you tell us where the Dutchman's Creek Greenway Bridge is?
It's actually, if you recall back at the November meeting, we done supplanted salaries for the 5.1 million, so we set that aside for a capital project to fund the Dutchman's Creek Bridge.
So,
All ARPA funds will,
so that's what is available is 9.8 million for capital. That's net of the Dutchman's Creek Bridge, any Veterans Park acquisitions, South Gateway Road. That's net. That's what council has at their discretion to spend on capital projects. That's a projected balance based on our knowledge today at beginning July 1st.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Jeff.
So you mentioned the CIP earlier. I know we have a variety of projects, and what I'm about to ask for is not exactly perfect, but how much money per year are we allocating to CIP? If you take the 5-year total and divide it by 5, what is that number? I thought you had a CIP slide.
Just for current year.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't ask that in advance, so you can
No,
be
you're
prepared.
fine. So that's just the current, but you're wanting the, In-
I mean, for the general fund CIP for fiscal year, this is the 5-year CIP plan. So for fiscal year 23-24, the amount is $3.4 million. For 24-25, the amount's $1.4 million. For 25-26, the amount is $2.2 million. For fiscal year 26-27, it's $907,000. And then for fiscal year 27-28 is $543,000, which totals $8,288,425. So that's for the 5 years. So if you're asking for an average of the 5, it's the 8.2 divided by 5, and y'all probably done the
that's,
calculation.
yeah, which comes to $1,660,000.
Yeah, but if I draw a line across that, it was about $1 million. It was the 3 million, and then we're kind of around $1 million. So I guess what I'm driving at is that in our current CIP, we have at least $1 million of capital planned currently for what we're aware of, right? Current budget is designed in a way that has $3 million worth of capital, but going forward, we have at least $1 million each year that we're aware of.
Except for almost $1 million in 26-27, and then $543,000 in 27-28.
Not exact, I'm with you. But we also didn't know we were gonna have $2 million worth of increases this year either.
And we look at that CIP every year, and so those are 5-year projections. It could be different next year, next fiscal year, so that's just what the projection is currently.
Can I clarify a statement, Jeff, just now? So we had spent $2 million additional for capital. Was that something council voted on
Yes,
and made a decision to do
yes.
based on what? What were some of the projects at $2 million? I'm going to say vastly was the Veterans Park acquisitions.
Yes. And, shoot. I didn't know.
That's okay. My point being is, so I'm trying to get at a point, okay? So right now, if you look at, and Jeff, I'll come back to that. I'm just trying to extrapolate on what you said. If you look at $1 million a year for CIP, okay, and let's say there are going to be times where things are going to happen and the city needs to make a decision on when to put this in play. So that is always going to happen. We could have chosen or not chosen to use $2 million this year additional, okay? So if you look at your CIP and we look at the CIP average over the next 4 years or until the next revaluation, in this budget, there's $3.3 million set aside for capital, broken out by cents. Okay, so we've got essential, non-essential, capital. Okay, so our highest year is this year, but it's set on that. I'm just making you aware of that. Yes, sir.
So with staff, I know we have a study going on currently, but is there anywhere that we have projected funds for the old city hall and any of the possible things that may have to be done to bring that building back to a habitable level?
Not that I'm aware of, we have not set any funds aside for any renovations to Old City Hall at all. At this point, we're waiting for the final report to come in from the architect.
That's correct.
So currently, we haven't kind of planned, because we don't really know what that number looks like just yet. So just one of the needs that I know is on the horizon that we haven't necessarily planned for, but we know is coming. And the mayor raised something that I'd like staff to talk a little more about as well is, how does y'all define what's essential and non-essential? capital's pretty clear, but, you know, how did you decide what
Staff-
was and wasn't required?
We depended on the departments. We asked the departments to go through everything, and basically, essential is what's needed to run your department as is. Anything over that was not essential. We didn't pick between it. That's why we gave y'all the list. We went with what departments turned in as their essential and non-essential.
That's correct, and so the non-essential, if you add the essential and non-essential together, that's what our city looks like right now.
Right.
If you're thinking about it like in those terms, like for fiscal year 22, 23 that we're sitting in right now, we did all these things, and we have an awesome city. We pick up trash on occasion. We
always pick up trash, not on occasion.
We always pick up trash. True. We maintain parks. We provide Mount Holly nights. We do all the things that we're doing right now. And so we said that are those two things combined. If we can like further filter that down, all right. If we didn't have anything other than you come to work, you go do your particular thing that your department's responsible for, and you leave for the day, and no raises and nothing else associated with anything, then that's what the essential applied to. And then the non-essential was those, what we called, I think maybe Brian or Michelle mentioned, it was a quality of life. Quality of life, the things that it makes Mount Holly, that's some of the things that we kind of put together is that list.
And the non-essential includes pay raises, benefit increases, all that's factored in for a period of 4 years based on 7.6%, 7.68% growth rate, et cetera, correct? So it's not something we have to worry about when we're discussing this. If you look at essential and non-essential as basically hands off. In other words, that's accounting for us to be able to do those things for our employees and our citizens today.
Right,
going forward.
Just for today. So when we looked at it, we're trying to set that 40.5 cent rate, or a rate, looking at revenue neutral, and then looking at where the rate needs to be. It doesn't take into account the growth rate. I don't believe for like the next 4 years. So it's just a snapshot of what do we need for next year? What does that rate need to look like for next year to do the essential, non-essential, and capital? So we're just trying to focus on one particular year, and that's that 40.5 cent that we presented tonight.
What increases are we faced with this next round? I know in the past we've had healthcare, we've had the state requires more for the pension fund, we've had various things. What are we facing in this next round that we've got to do, that we have a choice in?
Well, luckily on the health insurance this coming year, everybody's been really healthy, and our rate is not going to increase. So that's a 0% for next year. So we're really happy about that. It does include the merit program that we want to implement mid-year, which would be like a December of next year when we would implement merit. It also includes the salary study, and then it includes a COLA for all employees.
So, general question, how has it been recruiting talent lately?
Well,
Maybe tell the economic development story.
it's tough. It's tough for everybody. I think all departments. I think it's tough to recruit folks. It's tough to retain people because there's other places that want police officers. They're in high demand. Other people want fire. Other people want all the employees because they're all in high demand. So it's tough to get people here. And once they get here, it's tough to retain them. Therefore, that's the reason we've set these things in place as far as the COLA, and that's why we're doing a salary study every 2 years and looking at position increases the every other year besides the year we're doing the salary study. So, it's hard to recruit and retain employees for sure.
I have a question.
Yes, Lauren.
So I was looking at the revenue neutral slide. I guess maybe I'm not understanding this, but it appears to me that what this slide from LGC says is that the tax rate to produce the same, like, basically taxes that we collected this year would be 32.6. And that if we adjusted it for growth, that would be 35. And yet what we're suggesting is 40.5. And I understand that there's a lot of things going on there, but that seems like a very large difference to me. And I guess on top of that, when we look at the fund balance slide, I mean, essentially we're budgeting here to assume that we'll have a $10 million surplus at the end of next year. Is that correct? Am I?
That's
Is that
this
my?
year.
Am I?
That's this year.
That's this year. Okay.
Right? Did I understand that right?
Cumulative and unrestricted fund balance, yes. That is
So
the
our
end of
unrestricted fund balance at the end of
2023,
this year
this
is
year.
about 10 million.
Correct.
Okay. So it just seems to me like and I love this about the city, that we are always very conservative in our budgets and that we always seem to have a surplus, which is a good thing, but it's also not a good thing if you're looking at it from the standpoint of the people paying the taxes. I mean, I know that we turn these surpluses into things and services that we give back to the citizens, but maybe in this instance, it might not be the best thing for us to shoot 5 cents above the tax rate mark. I feel like maybe there's somewhere in between. Like if we can actually be revenue neutral at 32.5 and we're suggesting 8 cents higher than that, then that, I mean, I get somewhere in there. Like, I'm not suggesting you should get exactly what we got this year, because I realize we need to pay people more. There's inflation. There's a million things going on, but it does seem like 40 is very conservative. And maybe it's council's job to kind of try to rein that in a bit. I mean, I feel like there's maybe a happy medium in between there somewhere.
Okay. Anybody else before I call on Jeff? Just thought I'd throw it out there. Mr. Meadows?
Just a general comment, and we talked about this before. While I appreciate the LGC spreadsheet, and I'm happy to have that tool, that's exactly what it is. We've got another financial expert in the room that also runs spreadsheets and has different cuts and slices and dices from different aspects. So it is a tool that gauges where am I, maybe this is a question for you, David, in comparison to where I was last year, plus the capital, plus anything else that I have to do. So it's kind of a baseline. It's not a set piece, if that makes any sense. So I too question that number, just for public knowledge, that I'm like, well, why aren't we using 35.5? And when you talk to staff, what you find out is that there are other things that we go back to the strategic vision plan. We go back to, our capital council priorities that we have, that, if you don't want to do those things, you can do a number much less than that. But the question becomes, which of those priorities are you going to hold in place? Do you not want to have Parks and Rec, which is in this mix? I mean, which is a crazy thought. I mean, who's going to not do Parks and Rec? But anyway, that we don't have to. There's nothing in statute that says we must. So I just want to point out that that is a tool. So one of the things that I am also looking at, and that was why I was asking the capital numbers, is it feels like we've got $3 million in this current rate in this year, and going forward, we can identify known somewhere $1 million plus or minus. And just one project that, like I said, I brought up before. I mean, I see a representative of the Historic Society here that's watching very closely about what's going to happen to that building, what happens to the space we have here. Resources, that's just one thing. We could talk about others that we know are potentially coming. We have this grand dream with the Veterans Park expansion and changing that we know if we pursue that is going to cost more. So, I'm trying to figure out how you balance. Like I said, none of these are council pet projects. They're all coming out of the strategic vision plan. We can call on Greg, and he can usually look it up pretty quickly by page and tell you, this project's tied to that, and here's what people said they wanted. So at the same time, I'm hearing I don't want to pay extra taxes, and I don't want to pay for that. So I'm trying to balance those two things. But I'm wondering too, if there's $2 million a year, if it's a penny for 300,000, is 38 or 39 cents begin to work? versus the 40, or is 40 what we're set on? I'd love to hear where other people are at on that thought. I mean, I have some uneasiness around 40, but I'm only one person, so I don't know kind of how to proceed from there, and I think that's what we're trying to get to at the end of the night.
Yeah, does anybody have any comments? I was going to call Mr. Cheapwood up for some scenarios in a moment.
Well, my thoughts are going with staff recommendation. They're here with them numbers every day. They're dealing with every department head. If we want to have our city to remain the way it is today for the next year, that's my opinion. That's where we need to be. We're looking at 16.5%, from the county's looking at dropping 24.69%. And everybody else is like 10 or under. Municipalities. So anyway, I just feel that we need to go with staff recommendation at 40.5 cent for our tax rate. Nobody wants to lose a Christmas parade or athletic programs or educational programs or salary studies. I mean, we just need to maintain what we have. We don't need to go backward. And if we have a little extra money at the end of the day, that's fine, but it's just going to make our city better.
So not to confuse people, nobody's talked about cutting any of that.
Right.
I mean, that was the 30 cents that
That was the
included all of the
non-essential.
Christmas parade.
That's
But
the
that scares people.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about doing. What we're talking about is how to pay for capital.
Right.
Okay, so I don't want people
Sure.
listening to go, oh, the council's talking about changing the Christmas parade. No, it's not what we're saying.
It was already talked about with, athletic programs, so it wasn't just me.
Well, that hasn't been talked about tonight.
Yeah.
Getting rid of athletic, no. What we said was you can't, and that's part of the non-essential that everybody agreed we're paying for. What we're trying to determine is capital. If you got essential, non-essential accounting for 30 cents of the rate, what part of the next 11 cents or 10 cents do you want to put towards capital? So I don't want people to think we're trying to do away with Parks and Rec.
Right.
Because that is not what we said. In fact, there's $650,000 in unrestricted designated funding for recreation, to be used for recreation. So when you say things like that, it makes me, because what I heard was different than what we've discussed. Because I don't want people to get that understanding, because that's not what's been said by anybody.
Well, in the end, 40.5%.
That's cool.
That's where I want to be.
Excellent.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate this as well, that the $5 million is set aside for the Greenway, which is part of our Parks and Rec program at this point. So there's about $6 million of funds sitting out right now, which is admittedly better than we normally do. We've actually got some money that we're pushing towards those items that we talk about regularly. So, I mean, and just for clarity, what I said is, we're not even going to talk about eliminating athletic programs, is what I said. I didn't say we're looking to eliminate. I said that's crazy to even talk about that, just to be clear.
And this year we spent $2 million on Veterans Park. So in the last 2 years, we're going to have spent $8 million on recreation. Think about that number.
Well, I'm always going to be the biggest cheerleader for recreation.
I know that about you, my friend. I'd be disappointed if you weren't. But I think people need to realize our commitment to recreation is huge, and it's not just words. We put more money behind that than almost any other service this year alone. So one thing I'd like to look at, we look at the capital needs that are coming up, specifically when we look at a new fire truck and some others. So we had 1.7 million was on this sheet, and Mr. Cheatwood, this is where, if you got your little, you don't have the dude up here to do it? All right, that's fine. Well, we can do quick math, so I can do it. So when we go over to general fund capital requests, and the fire department by itself is 1.7 million of the 3.4 million. So they're half, right? Over half of the requests. And it includes a fire truck, some other things. So what I'm suggesting we take a look at and see how that affects us, because Mr. Meadows brought up a good point. If you look at CIP and numbers over the next 5 years, it averages $1 million. But if we brought down 1.7 million out of unrestricted fund balance, we got us a fire truck, or What if we're going to need more than one fire truck? They're all aging. We've seen that this year especially. What if you bought 2 fire trucks at the same time? Would you get a discount? And I can promise you the way inflation's going, if it's $1 million today, it's going to be 1.25 million next year. That's just, I mean, inflation's crazy. So, I mean, I think we need to look at part of this tax rate, 11 cents is dedicated to capital. If we could take a look at, well, let's buy a fire truck out of that. Let's buy 2 fire trucks if we get a discount. You see where I'm coming from? Maybe we can't make that decision based on this, but we still have the money in our unrestricted fund balance. They come back and say, yeah, if you buy 2 from us, here's your rate, 20% off, whatever it might be. So I think we need to look at unrestricted fund balance and pay some of these capital needs, especially for the fire department, because they definitely need fire trucks. I mean, that's become very obvious this year, okay? It's not like they don't ask for it, but it's where does it fit, right? We've got it in a plan. So I just think that if you took $1 million or $1.5 million under unrestricted, how would that look? Well, I'm not a very smart man, but that's between 3 and 5 cents on the tax rate. Does that sound reasonable, or I won't ask it that way. Am I correct in saying $1 million to $1.5 million is 3 to 5 cents on the tax rate?
Sir.
Now, based on everything that I've heard, yeah, you're making this a 1-year budget, and we'll worry about next year, but we already know where we're going to be. And the variable that we can fluctuate with each year is capital. Okay, we're not messing with employees, we're not messing with our services that we provide our citizens that everybody likes. What we're looking at is those really impactful quality of life vision plan projects and when they get completed, when they get accomplished, and how they get accomplished. So I think that we really have to balance that with this. I mean, I'm looking at, if we can pay some stuff out of fund balance, which is the people's money, it's not our money, right? So I'm looking at 37 cents because I think it's fair, I think it's reasonable. I think because if we use some money out of fund balance to pay some of these one-time capital, I'm not talking about ongoing operations, that's the non-essential, essential stuff we were talking about. I'm talking about one-time capital needs that we have, and buying a fire truck, I'd be the first to raise my hand to buy a fire truck. Who wouldn't? If you say you don't want a fire truck, I hope your house isn't on fire, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I would suggest. If we buy the fire truck, we take $1 million, we set it aside, put it in a line item, done, that's 3 cents to me. And then we've got enough going forward.
So one of the questions I asked earlier today was we're talking about this year's budget, but so this will be a little contrary to what you were saying in that it's easy to sit up here and reduce a tax rate. Easy. I can about promise you that you won't get a single hand up here raised to increase the tax rate. So I'm trying to balance this between what we're up against with where we are, where we'll be over the next 4 years, between now and the next valuation. So I don't disagree that works, but I asked a question earlier about, while we're only talking about this year's budget, we have a baseline for those items that you just talked about. Next year, that is a number, and the next year it's a number. Did you get to do that math that we talked about earlier today? Because one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about and why I went with 3 million in our current capital was, next year is that 300,000, 500,000, 600,000 that cuts out of the capital that rolls down into the essential and non-essential. Now you've only got the remainder in capital. So the thing I'm worried about doing here is that, we've got these quality of life projects that people are invested in. We've actually spent a good bit of money and time on, and then we turn around and not be able to finance them. Rates are not getting any better for us. They've actually gotten much worse as far as financing goes. And while we have some money currently available to pay as you go, if we trim this back too far, you're not going to have the surpluses that we've had in the year. So putting a down payment to get, a lesser debt service number, we haven't really talked about some of those pushes and pulls, but I know for a fact that people is how we deliver services, and next year's budget and the next 3 budgets are going to be compounded in that $3 million number we have today is not going to be 3 million at that current rate. Now, we do have growth, where I get nervous on growth though is that, can anybody tell me what date we're gonna get those COs to hit and how much we're actually going to collect? So I know it's coming, I know it's beneficial, and we win as far as diversifying our tax base. I think I've heard it said multiple times, we've never really had commercial growth. Commercial growth is what protects the residential rate. If you can get commercial growth to come in, they pay more than their fair share, so to speak, in government terms. They pay for their services like anyone else does, but those are positives, but how do we balance this properly going forward? So, I could easily say, well, we don't need to do that capital this year. We can cut 10 cents out. We could go with 30 cents, and it would make sense right this minute, but as you go forward, we would be destroying a lot of the things that we have set a vision for, built policy around. Even before I started serving, some of the policies we're implementing. Greenway's been around how long? 20 years, 22 years, something like that?
25, almost
and-
26 years.
And we're about to have one of the biggest pieces, but kind of comes the crown jewel that really makes it what was envisioned is right on the horizon. I don't want to lose those opportunities. So I'm struggling with what number to go with. I mean, staff has presented a number. Could it come back a penny or two? Possibly, but what are you sacrificing for that penny or two? And that's what I don't know. And I'd like to know what that projected compounding is. I know that it's not going to be perfect, but we've got some number for our operational number that we're looking at this year. And we know that we've got, 2 and 3 potentially with a merit and the others. I mean, there's 5% on top of that number. And even if you carried that forward, to give us some idea that, as we project these budgets forward, because while it is this year's budget, we got to pass it. I know we got to balance this budget, but we all know that capital erodes as operation goes up, right? So I'm trying to figure out how do we balance that, to figure out whether, is a penny reasonable to take or not? Or is it the number that staff has, put forward? So that's kind of where my head's at on it. It feels like we've got a few more numbers to know. I think going back to people on the ground, live in the houses, somewhere between, $19 and $42 a month, all of our households are going to experience, and I've said this out loud several times, we're going to have losers and bigger losers, because I can't figure out, when you set a rate for everybody, how do you fix that for folks that it's going to hurt more than folks that can afford it? I don't think there's a way to get there, unfortunately, with the system designed the way that it is. You set one rate, you're out of control of most of the process. So I'm sensitive to that group and made an impassioned plea to staff to consider them at the retreat. It feels like that has been considered, and I don't know, because one of the things I asked staff earlier when I was reviewing this chart with them was, if you take 10 cents off, this number that hits the person at 19 only went down to like 16. So, I mean, it's not a proportional cut. So at what point are you impacting quality of life and services and really not helping their monthly budget much? So the numbers are funny how they function.
I think it'd be good to have some scenarios of what I think Jeff alluded to, and I've stated it another way, is we could finance a few things. We could pay some things down and finance them. I'd like to see that as a follow-up to this. Some additional capital potential ways of doing it, and see which way we like. It could be 40.5 cents this year. Next year, we still reserve the right to change the rate next year. If it's not in the first year, we have some unknowns. The biggest unknowns, as Councilman Meadows said, is it's really frustrating, is we don't know when these capital projects are actually going to be finished. They are significant. I just asked, and I know you guys, we've worked together, I know where you're at. When it comes time and when they do hit, we need to reevaluate the tax rate based on that. And whoever's making those decisions, whenever they hit, it could be 5 years, I don't know. So whenever they do, we're going to have a significant impact to our budget, positive impact to our folks.
Based on what our economic development folks have been feeding us, I think we're 18 to 24 months out before, all these medical office buildings that the hospital's bringing in, the apartment complexes, because they're building in phases. So you're going to get a little bit of it, but not all of it. And then the next year you get a little more, and the next year you get a little more on, I don't remember the exact timing, but I think by the end of this year, we get, 100-something units, and then we get another 100 after the first of the year, and then by the end of the year, we get another. So it definitely is coming. It's just not as fast as we would like it to. And we've had one developer who's talked about developing that particular office building for 6 years now.
So we are breaking ground
Yeah.
on May the 4th. So be with you. So I'm just,
So I'm in total agreement in that, there's some really amazing things coming that will preserve our residential tax rate. We've not had significant multifamily. We've not had a lot of commercial development, even the Dunkin' Donuts and the Taco Bells. I mean, I suspect there's more of those on the horizon that are being whispered about. I mean, the Project Rock and Roll is now, Gold Bond's been, kind of spelled out. But I mean, even that, there's a period of time before that starts to hit, right?
no, some of it hits immediately, which I want people to understand. We didn't pay that money to get it. We gave up a portion of taxes on an entity that's never paid an ounce of property tax in their existence. 15 years is finally going to start paying. And wonderful. And they've made a decision to be here because it is a very competitive landscape that we're in. How many businesses have gone to South Carolina from North Carolina because of the competitive nature? We were in real danger of losing the largest single investment, $89 million in the county's history, and made some great moves to get that. And now, just like we did in lieu of taxes, we had Duke Power gradually come on. Well, guess what? That eventually got all that money in, and that's helping us. It went from, maybe $100,000 to $500,000 a year. That's significant. So we're going to be here in 15 years or 10 years in the build-out, okay? So I just want people to understand that.
Well, and just a general comment, and this is, one of the things that we have done. We have put a high emphasis on high-quality growth. We have empowered staff to push back on some of the chintzy, things that we have seen going and back them along the way, and it's showing itself. When we originally did that housing pyramid, the predominant housing type that we had was in that first rung, and they were dominant. To see that is now creeping up with the number of housing units that we're bringing on, it shouldn't have been a pyramid. It should be more of a box. That those couple of rungs to start should be relatively even, and then it should start tapering off. That's happening, and I just want to say it out loud that is because of the positive growth strategies that we put in place. We don't take just incomers, and staff works hard to demand high quality design standards and to go after and provide a level of service. Because I'm here to tell you, there's some folks that stuck around and are here still because staff responded quickly, gave them what they needed, and moved them towards a final decision, because nobody likes uncertainty. I mean, I brought up the old city hall. It's driving me crazy because I don't know what we're up against yet. I need to know. I can't make good decisions without good information. Staff provides good information in a timely fashion to folks so they can make a call, which demonstrates our goodwill. The political will to move you forward, we've demonstrated multiple times with this particular council. And just want to say out loud, I know staff appreciates it. I appreciate the work that we do and love that we have these kind of discussions.
You realize kind of the flip side of this. You made an investment to buy a house in Mount Holly. If you had an investment go up 68 to 87%, I think you'd be pretty happy with that. You made a quality investment. Now, the downside is you have to pay some property tax on that, which we're going to lower as much as we can. But your investment just went up significantly. Think about that for a minute. Some people's almost doubled. That's a pretty nice thing to have happen. So it works both ways. It's only bad until you sell your house. Then you're really happy. So kind of go from there. You just have nowhere to move right now. That's the problem. Okay, any questions, any comments, anything for staff before we adjourn?
I just want to appreciate all that staff has done, because it's unbelievable work that they've put into this, and to try to figure out all angles and to get where we need to be and all the scenarios. So I just want to thank staff for all that they've done.
And I second that, too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for not giving me a 3-inch notebook. I just think the amount of trees we kill with those notebooks every year, that, thank you. I like the way the presentation went. I like the way it's done. So Miles just looked at me. All right, so we're at April 24th. We have, when is the public hearing? June, right?
It's in June, but the way the schedule's laid out is that tonight was going to be the rate night where we could actually build the budget. So right now, we don't have a budget built because we don't know what the tax.
Well, you
rate
have a
is.
budget built based on your proposed rate, right?
Right,
Correct.
at 40.5.
At
But you don't know how,
40.5
you don't know how
Yes.
solid it is.
Yes, and that was the purpose of, the discussion tonight, so that we could actually have the big books for you that come in here at the first meeting in May, and then the May work session will be when you actually hear from staff again to say, here's the way the actual budget's laid out, and then the adoption hopefully at the first meeting in June, so.
Councilman Meadows?
Is it inappropriate to do a straw poll to see kind of where we're at, if anybody's?
Can do whatever you want to do. And people can say, I don't know. I mean, you may get an answer, you may not be.
You know where I am.
I think we know David is at 40.405.
Not sure where I am.
You're right beside David and Christina.
You what?
Said you're right beside David and Christina. Okay, so you're not sure. Christina?
Yeah, I'm not sure either at this point.
I don't think you're going to get an answer, Miles. Ivory?
I'm around 39 and a half.
Okay.
Between 38 and 40 for me.
Lauren?
Same. I'd like to see it below 40.5, but I think 37 is probably a bit low. So I'd like somewhere probably around 38, 39.
Okay. So what you've got consensus, what you're hearing is I can break this tie. Right? So I heard 39, between 38 and 39. I don't know, and then 39, or 38, 39, right? So if I say build a budget on 39, is that the fair thing to do to staff and council? That's what I'm asking. I mean, we're not voting here. I just think, in my opinion, okay, I can deal with not going to 37. All right, and I can be convinced that 39 is the number. Yeah, I could live with 39. Could you live with 39, Ivory? Could you live with 39, Jeff?
I think so.
Lauren?
Yeah, I think especially if we're looking at paying for a fire truck out of unassigned fund balance, I think that 39 is pretty realistic.
Okay. David, you good?
I could live with 40.
All right.
That's my final answer.
Okay, so we got 40. You're still between the two of them, but what do you think about the tax rate?
Go ahead.
I could live with 39.
Okay.
You got it.
All right, 39 cents. That's your, do we have to take a vote on that, or is that just direction?
This direction's fine.
All right, there we go. Wow, wasn't that scientific? It was to lead to that, but there's a lot of science that went into it.
Helps me so much, thank you.
You are welcome, thank you. Hey, guys, really, I like this format. We've been doing 20-some budgets, right, David, Phyllis? We've done 20-some, a lot of you've done 8, maybe. I like this, Michelle. I just want to give you, thank you. Thank you for the last-minute analysis, Professor. Great job.
Becky,
And Becky sits back there just quiet.
All the staff.
All the staff, you guys did great. You
Yeah, it
know,
was-
budget meetings used to last, how long, 5 hours?
5 days, depending on the mayor.
True.
And we had the books, remember?
Oh, we went through every line item in these books. Aren't y'all glad you weren't here at that time? I'm really thankful to appreciate how good it is now,
Thank you.
just
And-
different times.
And I
But,
just want to thank all the departments as well. We couldn't do it finance without their help.
Well, I think everybody's on the same page, and everybody's trying to make a place better, and we understand there's a balance. And a lot of us live here and pay, hey, by the way, we pay property tax too. My house went up 83%. I get it, so we all are in that situation. So thank you. We appreciate it. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Moore, second by Ms. Polish. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. We are adjourned. Darn, Cheatwood.